Shemai, hello, welcome back to another instalment of Learning Welsh with Pure West Radio and Learn Welsh Pembrokeshire. We are up to Uned 25, Unit 25. There's not that many units to go, so who knows, we're coming to the end of these video diaries, these weekly diaries, so I hope you've enjoyed them. Unit 25 was primarily called Asking for Things in a Cafe, which it does start off like that, but it's also like a massive revision unit. But it's strange because it doesn't feel like revision because it's only slowly introducing old concepts with more recent concepts that we've learned. In particular, different types of mutations and having multiple mutations in one sentence, which I'll get to in a moment. But it doesn't feel like anything revision-esque because we've learned everything incrementally and we've done the units. The way that it's all structured means that we're unaware of actually just how much we've learned. And when you consider that my little group have gone through all of this in 1 year, and this is usually 2 years worth of work, it's something that's quite reassuring, I think, that whether you do this over 2 years or whether you do it in one, you get to the revision unit, and yes, there's still things that you're not 100% confident on, but you know that something should or should not be in a certain place or a certain phrase and things like that. And that's what we've been learning this over the last week, is asking for things in a cafe. So how is the food in the cafe? Sit, Mair, Boyd and a cafe. Now, when you use Welsh kind of casually, you've got like a tiny grasp of it. Sit, Mair and Mair is often a common thing that people would use anyway. But this is actually used now in this unit. So we're looking at different phrases and also how to ask questions in a different context to just a family. So, ydy'r ten oer, is the tea cold? And ydy'r cacennau'n flasus, are the cakes tasty? So there's different ways that they've incorporating different things. We've got more apostrophes turning up now. So instead of we've got apostrophe r, which is the. And we've also got the negative as well. So, Dir Boyd ddim yn barod, the food isn't ready. Going back to a rule that did get broken once about the double D's of dydi, he, them, having the D and the them come through. So, Dir tea ddim yn boeth, the tea isn't hot. So that's something that we've considered. We've also looked at sending postcards, which have got positive, mai, and negative, does dim. And we were given phrases and different words to use as well. And we could talk about Dir tawe ddim yn hyfryd, the weather was not lovely. And then looking at mai and oes and does dim. So all things that we've done way back when in earlier units have come back, but we're adding to the sentences and making them contextual. In this instance, looking at food in the cafe, which has been really good. So, oes sugar in a coffee? Is there sugar in the coffee? All very useful things that we can use out and about. So it's more like a vocabulary book that I used to have whenever I went on holiday to France. You got your vocab book. It's no good having a dictionary. It's about having, I need phrases, I need stock phrases. But it's great that it's being taught here at the end of the course, because we now understand the structure and the formulation as to how these sentences come into being, and also how to answer them properly. So we've had, on this previous page, ydy'r coffi'n dda, is the coffee good? So that's an is, so you respond with ydy or nac ydy. And then here, oes sugar in a coffee, is there sugar in the coffee? Oes or nac oes. So there's different yeses and nos for lots of situations with Welsh, and you've just got to know them. And then does dim llaeth ar ôl, there's no milk left. So does dim, there is no. And then we were looking at asking questions using oes, and more rules then as to how to use my and ew. So when you're asking a question, my is used for should questions, so how, for ble questions, which is where, and pryd, when. So sut mae'r teulu, how's the family, ble mae'r car, where is the car, and pryd mae amser paned, when is coffee time. So they use sut mae, but if we're using pwy, beth, or faint, it's yw instead of my. So it'd be pwy yw tutor, who is the tutor. Beth yw eich enw chi, what's your name? And also, faint o'r gloch yw hi, what time is it? So you've got the my and the you, so we're learning rules around that now, which is really good. And then we looked at a compass. Now, all of us were in agreement, and it must be because we live in West Wales, Diwrhain, none of us could get at all. So it's good that we had this little bolt on onto the inner cafe. Gogledd for the north, De for the south, Gorllewin for the west, and Diwrhain for the east. But when you talk about them, when you give directions on a map, mae Bangor a Wrecsam yng Ngogledd, Cymru. So that's a nasal mutation. But then when you were coming to talk about kind of southwest, so that was Bangor and Wrexham in North Wales. If you're saying that Wrexham is in northeast Wales, you've got my Wrexham yn y Gogledd, no nasal mutation, but there is a soft mutation for Ddiwrhain. So the Diwrhain becomes a Ddiwrhain, the D turns into a double D. And it's understanding where those things come in, because it causes a nasal mutation, but the in the causes no nasal mutation for the first direction, but there is a soft mutation for the second one. It's just how it goes. And then we went through different cities and where they were in the group as well. And then we started looking at ages. Now, ages are peculiar because they use the old feminine numbers, and that's for boys and girls, which I got wrong in my gwaith catcher of my homework last week. So you look at my un-oed, he's 1, my un-ddwy-oed, he is 2. So even though it's a he, we use the feminine numbers, and it's the same for my hun-dair-oed. And there's also, of course, a soft mutation there as well, and my hun-bedair-oed. And you could ask the question, Beth, so it's a Beth question, Beth yw oed dy fab di? How old is your son? And then we got to more pronunciations. And I have to admit, we're pretty good at our pronunciations as a group. We'll go through a sgwrs, a conversation, and I'm quite chuffed actually with how well we are able to enunciate the words. And also, it's typically now, there's only like 1 or 2 sentences in a whole conversation that stumps us, but otherwise we know what's going on. And then we went through a question that's likely to come up in our exam in June, which is a picture of someone. No, Tom. This is Tom. This is the example that's literally in the book, it's not just me. Byw, Bangor, teulu, trio blant, hoffi, darllen, neithiwr, I darfan, gwaith. And there's a picture of him working. And what we need to do for the exam is to answer questions and say who he is, what his hobbies are, and what he likes doing with his family. And that's what we got to. It's only, I think, the second time this year that we haven't finished the unit in one go, although we pretty much did, now that I'm turning the page. And then next week, we'll be looking at siarad am bethau y phobl sy'n perthyn I bobl eraill. So there's a few things there. We've got soft mutations. We've got seen, which we've only looked at very, very briefly. Apparently we look at seen, which is more in the second year for those that will progress. But that's talking about other people's belongings and relatives. So ein ti ni, ein ti nhw. Oh, that's useful. So we's and they's and belongings and possessions, which is really cool. So I look forward to learning more about that as we approach the looming exam date that's coming up. And yeah, I'll see you all again next week. Hwyl fawr!